Madam Chair, you are live.
Good evening, everyone. I'm India Oakes, Chair of the Annapolis Education Commission, and I'm calling our April 2022 meeting to order. Okay, let's start by doing roll call so we can confirm we have a quorum of commission members. Ward 1 is vacant, so moving to Ward 2, Jamie Weaver.
Here.
Ward 3, Enid Collison Lee has an excused absence, so Ward 4, Kayla Golder.
Here.
Ward 5 is myself, India Oakes, so on to Ward 6, Corey McCall. Ward 7, Laura Booth.
Present.
Ward 8, Jessica Packler.
Here.
At-large member, Odessa Ellis.
Here.
At-large member, Ken Starks. At-large member, Janet Norman.
Here.
At-large member, Grace Matthews. Alderperson, Sheila Finlayson. And our non-voting member, Pam Bukowski.
Here.
Great, we have a quorum. Next up on the agenda is a presentation on community schools by our special guest, Dr. Shannon Pugh. I know there is a lot our commission wants to talk about, so I will just turn the floor over to Dr. Pugh to introduce yourself and start your presentation, and then we can move to some questions from the commission.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mrs. Oakes. So my name is Shannon Pugh. I am the Director of Community and School-Based Programming for Anne Arundel County Public Schools. And within that office, number one, I am the County Blueprint Implementation Coordinator. So each county in the state had to, the county government and the school system had to jointly appoint a implementation coordinator, and that is one of my main responsibilities. I also supervise the Title I program, so funding that comes out of Title I. And my absolute joy and delight and excitement is that now the community school program is also under my, I don't even want to say supervision because we have so many great program managers that we'll talk about, but I get the privilege of facilitating this program. That is in various stages across the county. So I look forward to kind of walking you through a little bit of where that is. So Julian, am I ready to go with sharing? I know you did something to my screen.
Yeah, you should be able to share just straight to the actual presentation screen you had up.
So share screen. I don't want to mess me up here. Okay. All right, there we go. Hopefully that's it. Can everyone see the white screen?
Looks great.
All right, so the most important thing is we have a logo, and that's always important. As soon as you get a logo, you're official. So very excited that to talk about the community school strategy and programming here in Anne Arundel County. So I do know that there are a lot of questions, and so I thought I would break it up into two sections, and I hope that ends up working. Is that first I'm gonna talk a little bit on a high level of the ideas about it first. So I thought I would start off by talking about the law, which is this is part of the blueprint for Maryland's future. Talk about what a community school is in Maryland. There are a lot of different designs of community schools, not only around the country but even around the world. And then just highlight which of our schools are community schools. Then I thought I would take questions. So that's the big thing of just asking those. And then I'll get into some of the services and programming that our schools are very excited to start planning and working on, and then building on for some of our schools like Mills and Tyler that have been that were able to start this, and then they had COVID. So we'll talk about that. But so that's how I thought I would divide up the questions. And of course, you can ask other questions as well. But just kind of know I plan on stopping at least twice for that piece. So I mentioned that community schools comes out of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. So in the Kerwin Commission, there were many months of really breaking down what are the barriers to student success in general. So of course we can talk about Maryland, but what are the barriers to all of our students succeeding at the rate that all of us want them to achieve, and to eliminate those opportunity gaps. And so what's on your screen, this is not unique to what the Kerwin Commission found. This is just what we know in education greatly impacts all of our children as far as them being ready and available for learning. Number one is student attendance. I don't think that would be a shock to anyone on the screen. If children aren't there, then we as educators can't teach them. So that is certainly a major component. I'm not going to read each of these, but you see the word access over and over and over again. And what we do know about education, primarily in the United States and certainly in Maryland, is access to various things greatly hinders children. And the number one predictor of student success in the United States is their level of poverty. So either they're where they are, if they are in poverty, or if they're not. I'm sure everyone here has heard we can do a lot of prediction about student success based upon a zip code. So what you see on here are all the things that we know when students and families have access to these things that you see on the screen. We know that student achievement is more likely to be on the positive side than others. And so knowing this, the Kerwin Commission, and then what we call Kerwin Light, so some of the early legislation that came out of the Kerwin Commission, they set up the what we call the community school program to help try to connect families and students to resources. And in many cases, a lot of these resources exist. We just need to make sure our families are connected to the resources. And so this was built into the legislation. And so we're going to talk about what a community school is in Maryland. And I already said it's a little bit different in different places, but in Maryland, the Blueprint defines community school. It's establishes a set of strategic partnerships. So this isn't anybody or any institution doing this on their own, trying to be the one person, the one entity that's trying to really help and build the supports that our students need. This is a set of strategic partnerships with the idea of making sure that we're connecting our students and our families to, in many cases, existing partnerships and opportunities. One of the things I've really discovered as I've dived into this realm of work here in Anne Arundel is we have so many resources, but I don't think we're really good at communicating them. So we have so many churches, so many civic groups, so many organizations that just have wonderful things that they're dying to get and to connect to families and to students. And so a community school is really the connector. How can we connect our students and our families with the resources that exist? And certainly there are resources that we figure out don't exist, and so we can work on those. But the first primary reality is the school should be the hub. And then as we're coming out, we're connecting families and students to things that already exist. One of the things about community schools that is a little bit of a paradigm shift for education is the focus here is what happens outside of the typical classroom school, the classroom during the day. So I can speak as an educator. If we have a student who's struggling in math, what we have done for the last 150 years in education is we've decided, what can we do to help them in math in the classroom during math time? This is an opportunity for us to really acknowledge and go, okay, a student is struggling with math. What can we do outside of the classroom that could help the student with math. And that is a big paradigm shift for us. So here's this great opportunity to recognize that there's a lot of supports that go into students and building them up so they're prepared to learn when they are in the classroom. So that's that piece. And so really I keep focusing on what you see on the screen. It's about what happens outside of the classroom. It's about connecting families to community resources. And ultimately, it's about disrupting generational poverty. So what can we do for families to help them to whatever they aspire to support that? And so then that we're disrupting that generational poverty so the next generation has a little bit of a better head start type program. So within the blueprint, there is a grant, and I'm going to tell you that I normally don't ever talk about what this grant is called. I just call schools and say, congratulations, you're now going to be eligible for a community schools grant. But the grant within Blueprint is called the Concentration of Poverty Grant. And it's and the focus is when we have high concentrations of poverty, we know that those students just have a harder time, even if they might be students who have economic disadvantages, but they might not be at a school that has a high concentration of poverty. There's just there's some differences there. So what the grant does at a Blueprint, it's based upon farms percentage numbers, and I'm going to walk you through those in just a second, and then I'll stop for questions in just a slide or two. And there's two parts of the grant. So in the first year or two, and every year after that, there's a personnel grant. And the purpose of that personnel grant is to pay for a full-time community school program manager. So that's the person who's tasked with helping to create with partners, with the steering committee and with the school team and parents and other stakeholders, that community school approach and strategy. And then we also use that grant for a full-time nurse in Anne Arundel. So every single one of our community schools has a full-time nurse. Most schools only have a part-time nurse. So I can highlight some of those differences as we go through. Then in year 3, we have a second grant, and it's called the per pupil allocation. And that's exactly what that means. So if I have a school and I have 100 students who are eligible for farms, then I get a per pupil amount for those 100 students. So if I have a very large school, I'm going to get a larger grant amount. And then if I have a small school, it's a small grant amount. So this coming up year, we're looking at a difference. In some schools, it's 30,000, and in other schools, it's 90,000 or above, because they have a very large population of students, and they can have that piece. So this is a slow rollout of community schools in Maryland. And so on the screen, you have where we are. So we first started in the 2019-2020 school year. Any school that was 80% or above with free and reduced lunch, so basically the farms application forms, they qualified for the first round of COP or community schools grants. And so you'll notice the year, and I think this is so important, is that they really had a half a year and then they had COVID. So all those great plans and ideas that they had, it disrupted it a little bit. They were able to really pivot and try to provide some phenomenal resources to our families. But a lot of things that schools do in those first year or two, they just weren't able to finish that piece up. And then we had in that should say 2020, 2021, my apologies. But then we had 75%. So 75% or above farms. This is our next wave of schools. So we had 2, then we had 7. And of course, this is in the middle of COVID. At this time, we also, the governor actually vetoed Kerwin. So we actually just kind of held tight for these. So these schools did not get up and running until the spring after the override of the veto last year. So we have the 7 schools there. This current school year, we had 3 new schools: Annapolis, Germantown, and Maryland City. And then next year, we're so excited that we have 3 more. So I did it very intentionally, highlight the Annapolis schools, because I know you're probably interested in that. Although there might be some changes in how they are figuring out poverty rates, because they're playing with some other measures at the state level as required by Blueprint, I believe that the only other school in the Annapolis area that will become a community school is Annapolis Middle School. So they are right about, we have some tricky things with the poverty numbers, with the farms numbers this year, or going into next year, because we have federal numbers, which, so Annapolis Middle School will be able to join the Title I family. We're very excited about that. Title I can provide additional supports for academics and also some social, emotional, behavioral. But their state farms numbers did not get them to where they were able to come on next year. So I anticipate that they will become a community school in 23, 24. And then that is probably where we're going to end with Annapolis. Annapolis High School is close, but the lowest that we go for concentration of poverty is 55%. And so you see 65% here, then we will go to 60, then 55, and then that's it. So then that is the end of the rollout for community schools. So I'm going to take a breath. And does anyone have any questions just on these big things, just wanting to understand anything I've said so far? Jessica, I see your hand.
Hi. So I do have a question. I'm just wondering what you were just talking about with Annapolis Middle and Annapolis High School. I know with Title I, when you're discussing poverty and Title I schools, on the federal level, they decided some time ago that because it is so much harder across the country and everywhere to get middle and high school kids to fill out their farms forms, they can extrapolate the numbers for the farm students in middle and high schools based on the numbers that are in the elementary schools. Is that possible for the community schools as well? Because I mean, obviously, you know, and this is what it says in the federal guideline that was issued, is that it's known that high school kids aren't going to fill out the forms because they think, well, I'm not going to eat the free lunch anyway, so there's no point in doing that.
So unfortunately, right now under the state law, it is really the forms, the actual pay. We do have some direct certification. So if students are or families have SNAP or some of those, but it really is the paper form. As I mentioned, they are playing with a new metric for capturing community and neighborhood poverty that may or may not change that a little bit from the state level. Also on the federal level, they allowed us for the second year in a row to roll over students who previously qualified and who didn't fill out the forms. The state did not allow us to do that. And so that's why for the first year, as someone who's supervising both these programs, it makes my head hurt because I'm talking to one school, I have a certain percentage, and then but a different program, it's a different one. So it's a great question, but we're working with the state law right now. So I'm curious of what these new metrics are going to show. I have a feeling, it's a hunch, that we might have more schools, but maybe a lower percentage in the existing schools, if that makes sense. So I'm curious as to see what those look like. Anne Arundel is one of the pilots for that, of trying to measure those different measures of poverty, of neighborhood census data, and some of those other pieces. So Jessica, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much.
Awesome. Dr. Tobin.
You know what? I think Ms. Norman was waiting. So
Oh,
Janet,
I'm sorry.
Did you have a question? You want to go ahead and then I'll go?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Tobin. So my question as a Annapolis High advocate and former PTA pres, I've always known and always heard every former principal we've had say, well, here's our farms number for this year. And we know our actual farms number is about,
Higher.
10% higher than that. So how do we as AACPS, how do you as AACPS remove more of those barriers to access, getting that information filled out? And is the difference in rolling over the data from the previous year, is that codified in state law? How do we get, is that a procedural regulation? Knowing, because Annapolis High has always been around 50, 55, 60%. And I don't want people's distrust of government forms to the whole high school from getting the help it really needs?
So that's a great question. And I think that goes back to the new state superintendent really is trying to reimagine what those possibilities could be. For federal accountability measures, we do have to identify students as far as so we can monitor their progress as well. So under what I just mentioned about playing with some different metrics to see what happens if we look at poverty in a different way, I think it might capture a little bit more. That's why I said I think the number will go up, but for COP, for the community schools, it is a 50, it's actually above 55%. No one's told me if it's 55.1 or what that is, but it's above 55%. I did make it what I called the tour of all of the middle and high schools in the county that were close and said, hey, I know this is a problem. I taught high school for years and years and years, so I know it's a problem. But I actually ran a report for them that I called Ever Farms. And so I basically was able to say, hey, your official rate is 48%, but I have the data that shows that 61% of the kids in your building right now, they at some point qualified for free and reduced lunch. Now, they might not be in the same situation. So I'm just acknowledging that, yes, this is a challenge, but
Right.
really, we don't actually say what, so I get the names of the schools from the state. And so we don't actually turn in and go, these are the schools that qualify. They use their the data that is however the law is at the time to actually tell us who qualifies. So as far as advocacy, I think first let's kind of see what these new metrics do. It might take care of that. It might not. I'm not 100% sure, but I think there is some opportunity here to do some of the other allowing them to look at some of the feeder patterns for that for the state as well. So I'm hoping that within this next year, and as I mentioned, Anne Arundel County is piloting some of that initial data through Jason Dykstra's office, and so I'm curious to see what that is. So maybe in a year I'll have a more definitive answer of once I kind of see what that is of how we can advocate for not only Annapolis High School, but the same situation is for Glen Burnie High School and North County High School and Meade High School. Right now they're hovering at 48 to 50% because students are hesitant to turn those forms in, and they have to turn them in by a certain time too.
Families are hesitant, right?
Yeah, that's true. Thank you for correcting me. Yeah. And the key there is you have to turn it in by a date. And so it's not even that I turn it in January, it doesn't count. We actually take the September 30th enrollment or the farms numbers and then divide by the student population on October 1st. So that it's really that data that goes through.
My question is more, what can we as a commission and what can we as the liaisons to the schools do with your help to better explain the benefits that could be coming to students and the school if these forms were filled out and getting the help to fill them out. I mean, I know if you give students no reason to excel at something, they won't try. I mean, my son took the whatever standardized test the first year of for geometry, and they just don't try. There's no incentive, and it's just somebody else's form.
So a little bit of what we tried to do this past year after what I call the tour, we did. I really stole it a lot from Howard County. I'm going to be perfectly honest, but they have a nice one pager of all the benefits. They call it. It's not just free lunch. We did put that up. We did send it out. I just think this was a hard time for people to be incentivized to fill it out anyway, because they already knew that of what was, to come with the food situation. And so I'm wondering if next year that piece is helpful. I know that at Glen Burnie High School, the principal there, Mr. McGuire, I think he did a really nice job of highlighting every day an announcement such as, hey, if you turn this in, you get, your applications to college or your AP exam or something like that. I just don't know what really would work this year, but I'm curious as to what we can do to help that out. I also know a few schools are trying to host some evenings or some events that they can, if we had the highest return rate on farms forms actually last year because Jody Reese's people actually went car to car as they pulled up to pick up lunch and had them fill out the form. I mean, so I don't know how to
That's the
replicate
kind of,
that.
that's
Yeah.
the kind of actions that we'd like to whip
Yeah.
and get the momentum for. Like,
Mhm.
we can't keep putting things upon the students. I mean, my kids,
Mhm.
the announcements, we can't keep putting, or didn't care about them. So we can't keep putting things on the students to like see why it's important when
Mhm.
they've got other priorities.
Yeah.
So if you can use us and the PTAs
Mhm.
to help distribute information so the parent and guardian community
Mhm.
sees it, that's a doubly effective way of communicating. But if it's only, it comes from CPS Central and it goes straight through the administration, they only have so much time to reach, they can't reach the families as effectively as the PTA and other places can.
Awesome. So I look forward to kind of thinking maybe there are some certain events that we could host with next year, August, September, that
Right.
families will find meaningful to come out, and then we can do that piece of that. So thank you for that focus.
Or we incorporated it in every back to school night attendance.
Yeah.
Hey, win a raffle with turning in your farm thing. And PTAs would all like put prizes toward this.
I love that. So I'm writing that down.
Yeah, I mean, we've got an active, enthusiastic set of parents, but they need help getting over these bureaucratic stumbles.
I
really
think
appreciate
Dr. Tobin is next, and then I think Odessa and Jessica, but somebody can correct me if I was incorrect in that order.
Yeah, thanks. So I was, I think, and I apologize for getting in a little late to the meeting. We have a state superintendent who's very focused on this and understands that there needs to be a different battery of qualifications, so to speak. I also just want to mention another way to communicate some of this, because some of this will need tweaks to the legal structure. And I'm on an ad hoc committee that the Maryland Association of Boards of Education has put together for the implementation of the blueprint. And a lot of what we're doing is bringing back the sort of implementation tweaks that we're hearing from our communities, from our staff, now that the legislation has been rolled out or is beginning to be rolled out. As with all things, you put especially a huge piece of legislation like this together, and then you figure out that there's some things that don't quite work the way you thought they would work. And I think the business, the question that Jess brought up is one of those cases of really saying, why aren't we aligned with what federal law says we can do in terms of putting these numbers together? And so I'm scribbling notes because I think those are some things to bring, for me to bring to MABE and to our state partners, but anybody else. I know a number of the folks on this commission do speak with delegates and so on. I think it's a good thing to remind the delegates you may be in contact with, or the state senators you may be in contact with, that these are some things that need to be ironed out to make this work better. So I just urge everyone, in addition to the on the ground work that Janet's talking about really getting that information to families, also just making the legal structure work for what we're really trying to do. And one of the things, and I'm sure Dr. Pugh, you're going to get into this, that we have been, for example, pushing with our state partners is, in one of the previous slides, it was noted, the idea of 100% of the money going to the school, right? We're beginning to see that the coordinators need some support from a centralized structure for things like purchasing, right? Because they shouldn't be purchasing experts and they don't have the time for that. They need to be able to be focused on the schools, on the community, and what their community school needs. So there are a lot of these things that we're trying out, and a lot of them we're meeting, with very receptive ears at the State House. They want to make this work. So please, I'm making notes, but please let me know if there are other things that you think should be transmitted because MABE, again, is a voice that can go in front of the state legislature broadly for all boards of education in Maryland and bring these issues forward. So, and thank you, Dr. Pugh.
Thank you, Dr. Tobin. Okay, is it Odessa and then Jessica, I think. And
Yes,
forgive me if I mispronounced your name.
Oh, no, that's fine. My name has been in the news a lot since that's a city in Russia.
Oh,
But
yes.
it's with one S though. But I went to a communities in school workshop in Ohio about 15 years or more ago. And I came back from that workshop with the understanding that communities in school is supposed to have a lot of wraparound services from the communities, from the community to come in to help the schools. And, I went to the board and I presented that information that I learned in that workshop, but I haven't really seen a lot of organizations or services from the community that's helping with students. For instance, parental involvement, a lot of parental involvement. I mean, we don't have a lot of parental involvement especially from these low-income communities. Now, one good example, about a month ago, I had a parent to call me because she lives in Robinwood and her ceiling collapsed. So they had to put her in up in an extended stay. She has two children. One attends Hillsmere and the other one attends Annapolis Middle. Okay, once she was placed in the extended stay, there was no contact with her as how she's going to get her kids, to school every day. So she called me up, and then I got involved, calling the housing authority and people who are supposed to be representative of the community. But no one knew anything about her being in this extended stay. So where's the connection with parents and schools? Finally, she did get transportation for her kids to attend school, but communities in school is supposed to be, my understanding, a lot of services working with the school system. So, can you kind of like clarify that a little bit more for me? Is just exactly, because I was around with the Thornton Commission and now we got the Curran Commission and it's supposed to be doing the same thing. So, it's like we just keep on, throwing these commissions out and these terms, communities in school, but are they really working? Are they really working? That's my question to you.
So you actually hit on a couple of things there. So the first one is you talked about going to the conference, 10 years ago. And I think that goes to the piece that this strategy has been around for a really, really long time. So when I say that, however, in Anne Arundel County, this particular strategy is really young. So I just say that piece because I think there's a different, there's more than one piece to unpack here. Certainly our goal in Anne Arundel County is to make sure that when something like this happens, like you're mentioning with this particular family, that the counselor or the PPW, actually we have a system, and it sounds like it didn't work as well as it should have in this situation, but the PPW would contact, we have somebody entirely in charge and supportive of students who are either, we call McKinney-Vento, but also homeless or temporarily displaced, where we actually have contracts with cab companies and others to get students who are temporarily not near their current location to school. So obviously we would have to look into kind of see what what happened there for those particular for that particular situation. But I think you also mentioned something very clear as you were talking about, we don't see as many of the community pieces within the school coming into the school to work with the families and the students. And that really is the vision of the community school strategy. And as we come more out of COVID, we are certainly, and I'm going to talk about wraparound services in just a minute, but we're certainly starting to see opportunities of groups and agencies and faith-based organizations and others who are really wanting to get into schools, and the schools will serve as the host for some of these pieces. So hopefully some of the concerns that you particularly mentioned, we will start seeing a difference in the community schools, because one of the jobs of the program managers is to help create an area where we are hosting those types of supports that will come in.
I guess my point is that since we have so many students who are living in housing authority, HACA, like when something like that happens, when they place a family in an extended stay because the kitchen ceiling fell in, and it has to be repaired, shouldn't there be already a contact with housing authority to let the schools know that there are 2 students living in extended stay somewhere and that they need transportation to school or services? If that's community and schools.
So I can't speak on behalf of the housing authority. I'm sure there is some type of structure there. As I said, we do have a structure where our PPWs normally are on top of that situation and can work with our office here to make sure that they do have transportation. But the point is well taken, as somehow something was missed here, but I certainly wrote down some, I'm going to follow up with the housing authority just to try to figure out what that structure is. So if I will be better prepared to answer that particular piece, with some definitive knowledge of the name.
Right. And the only thing I'm just saying that if communities in school, doesn't that involve wraparound services with communities, services from communities to assist the schools, like housing authority?
Well, so yes, so I will go over the wraparound services and in just a little bit. The schools that you did mention are actually not community schools at this time under this structure, but within the community school strategy, we do have and focus on absolutely those community outreach programs and ways to either through a social worker or some others, and I'll be able to highlight our social worker efforts in a few minutes that would help in that particular situation. But it sounds like we all have a little bit of work to do to make sure we're better supporting our families in that type of situation through either the housing authority or that communication.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Is there another hand up? I still have a few more slides, but I don't want to,
Yeah, I put my hand down so you could continue your presentation.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I do want to just highlight an amazing group of people. I'm so excited, and in front of you are community school program managers. So very excited that we also are working our way through some interviews to hire our 3 new program managers for our 3 new schools next year. But this is an amazing team, and what I think about this team is so amazing is the backgrounds of the people that you see. So we have former teachers in front of you, some former bilingual facilitators. We have a former librarian. We have some social workers here. We have someone who worked with juvenile services, someone who worked at Sarah's house. So we have really been very thoughtful and strategic, going back to Odessa's point of trying to find people who have connections to all these different experiences and resources that do exist. And I do talk to the principals, and as we're going through the process, and I just tell them I have a bias because I'm trying to create the district team, and ultimately we need to do what's best for the school, but always looking out for the opportunity to add more to our expertise as a district as we keep going. We do anticipate if using the current farms formulas that we have, we do anticipate about 30 community schools by the time we end up with the rollout 28 to 30. So I will have to have more than one slide to show my amazing team there. So I just want to highlight them because they are an amazing group of people. I want to break down what we do with so some of this is very prescriptive in the law. And so I just want to kind of go over that piece very quickly. So with community schools, we talk about a 5-year cycle. So a 5-year strategy of knowing that everything that we need to do through the community school strategy, they are all big lifts. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of planning. It takes a lot of working with very phenomenal community partners. So on the screen, you have just the year 1 deliverables of a community school. Most of this is very much in the law, but we hire the program manager, we get a full-time nurse, form a steering committee. So each of our schools has a steering committee that includes teachers, parents, students, and community members and partners who really are helping to create a strong community school. They are required by state law to complete a comprehensive needs assessment. That was put on hold a little bit during COVID, so we're trying to catch up with those. So I really say this past year is kind of like a 0.5 year, just with the reality of what we were able to accomplish. So I just always want to be mindful of that. Even if you see something with year 2, it might be because of COVID, things were pushed back. So they're really still working within the year 1 piece. Really starting to building those strengthening and forming community partnerships, and then starting to plan to connect families to resources. So year 1's a lot of planning, reflection. We have a district-wide survey. We have some tools for schools to use and that comprehensive needs assessment, but that's year 1. And then year 2, they spend the year after they take that comprehensive needs assessment, they create a 3-year plan. And so within the 4 pillars, I'll talk about the pillars in a moment, they have to create and come up with goals that they can measure achievement over the course of 3 years. And so that is their year 2, a lot of that work. And they're still starting to really find those connections, help families find those resources, and then continuing to build their program and their plan. And then we have the years 3 through 5. And then we are expanding some of those pieces. So the next slide talks a little bit more about wraparound services. But one of the things we are able to do for most schools, starting in year 3, is they do have enough funding for a full-time social worker. So that is something that we're very, very excited about. Every school that's in year 3 or more will have a full or part-time social worker next year. So one of the things that is very challenging that was kind of an aha to me, we have a lot of social workers who are paid for out of random, and I don't mean random is like bad, but a lot of different efforts. So we piecemeal all types of stuff. I even have a little grant here that I pay for a 0.5. I'm moving that to Germantown and a few others, but we kind of piece that together. But now this is great because these schools aren't like, oh, am I going to get it, or is it going to be taken away because there's a greater need somewhere else? So we're very excited that the schools will start having a consistent social worker. And so most of our schools will have a full-time social worker next year. And if they don't have it next year, they'll have it within the next 2 years. So I'm very, very excited about that. I know it's a priority of the school board and of the county government as well, but it costs money. And if you don't know, our social workers sometimes are 0.5 somewhere, sometimes 0.4, 0.2, but this is nice. You get a full-time one. They're entirely devoted to our communities and our kids within within the structure. So I'll talk a little bit more about the other things that we're trying to or able to actualize in just a minute. But once again, that 3 through 5 year, let's work that plan, and then they get to start over with a new comprehensive needs assessment as they move into year 6 and above. So under Maryland law, there are 4 categories of wraparound services. And so the first one, physical needs. And so when we think about the physical needs, and I'll talk about what our schools are specifically doing, but these are just things actually from the law that are called out in the law. The next one is social, emotional, behavioral. Then we have 2+ generational support. And I want to talk about this one a little bit because this is actually where the research says we make the most impact on our families. A lot of our schools, we spend a lot of time in these other pillars, but this is the one that we can truly, truly impact and make meaningful change in our students in their family lives. And then finally, the last one there, academic enrichment. I normally spend a lot of time unpacking why is it called academic enrichment and not academic remediation, academic support. So we really talk about how all of our students need enrichment, they need experiences. We need to celebrate what they know and build on that instead of going, oh, you struggle with reading, we're going to make you read a lot more for, for that. Nope, we're all going on field trips, we're all doing the things, we're all helping them with the arts projects and all of those. So I want to go back to this 2+ generational support. So one of the really strong piece of research is actually out of the Aspen Institute, and really focuses on what can we do, how can we change lives here. So I did steal this slide. I'm sure they don't object to it. This happens to say 6 key pillars, and this is talking about just that 2+ generational support. And we know if we can build and support families and their agencies in these particular areas, we can really, really make a difference. And so I'm very excited to highlight some of the things we're doing in these areas. But this is the reason, now sometimes it's called 2gen. I specifically say 2+ because we're talking about the toddlers, we're talking about the students who are currently enrolled, we're talking about their parents, and a lot of times we're talking about their grandparents, right? So we have a lot of grandparents in our community who are raising grandchildren. And so I just want to expand that, not just 2. And so as our schools are working on their plans in this pillar, we really focus in, what are we going to do for kindergarten readiness? We know that our commission to eliminate the opportunity gap identified kindergarten readiness. If we can get that right, we have such a better shot of getting our kids where we need them to be. And then on the other end, what are we doing to help our families who want to have more education or workforce development or some of these other pieces? So this is really the meat of a community school program, as far as if we're really making the difference. It's not that we don't pay attention to the other pillars, but this one is where we need to put a lot of energy, at least from the research. If you put the energy here, you'll get the families in, you'll get more parent involvement, you'll start getting all of that, and then parents can start advocating for themselves. It's one thing for me to say what I think they need, but it's entirely something different when a family who would benefit from these services are really starting to advocate for themselves of what they need. So I want to highlight a few things that we are doing in Anne Arundel County in these different pillars, and then I'll have time for more questions. So in that physical needs, I already talked about the full-time nurse. Very excited about that. We are working with quarterly resource fairs at least. So we have schools like Tyler has an amazing resource fair they do every month. They do it that month on the Saturday. Then they also do a lot of things on Wellness Wednesdays. So they have those programs there. A lot of schools, I want to go back to that. The quarterly resource fairs, the reason we want to focus on that is I'm trying to get the schools to work with nearby schools. Because one of the things is, if I'm in North County, we need to think about a North County strategy. If we're in Annapolis, we need to think about an Annapolis strategy. Because if I have a family who needs something, I don't want them waiting for 3 weeks until something comes back to their school. I want them to know that, oh, I get communication. I know that if I need a Saturday resource fair, where is it? Where can I go within my community? So we're really working on a regional strategy there. Health fairs, a lot of great health fairs. Our providers in our county are so incredibly generous with their time through the health department, through the hospitals. They're out there doing blood pressure checks. They're helping people with diabetes management and a few other things. We can also even use the energy here to expand our backpack program. So ensuring that our kids, when they go home on Fridays and they have the traditional backpack, we're putting extra things in those backpacks. We're putting bananas, we're putting some fresh fruits and vegetables that they can go home with those. Vision supports in our county government, or the health department does a great job. If you're a child in need, you get a voucher for 1 pair of glasses. I don't think anybody on this call will be surprised to learn that 6 and 7-year-olds lose glasses and break them all the time. And so we do have a little fund set aside at all the schools that if a child really, has broken or lost their glasses, we're just taking care of that for them. So we're working with America's Best and a few others, and we just take care of that. I'm very excited about our dental program. I'm waiting for the ink to be signed, but we worked with the health department, and starting next year, every school, every 3rd grader in our community schools will get at some point during the year a dental checkup, a dental cleaning, and then the fluoride, and then the sealants put on their teeth. And the health department is so excited about that grade level, because that's the one as their molars are starting to develop and everything. If we can get those sealants on those students' teeth about that age, then we're pretty golden. And that was really a great opportunity, because I knew that the health department, like I said, I also supervised Title I. They have a grant, and they did that for 3 Title I schools a year. But now we're like, hey, let's braid these resources together. They're still keeping that grant, and then the schools are being able to pay for that other. So we're very excited about that. That's our big win from the last 2 months. It probably took about 6 months of my life, but we're there. So I'm very excited about that, and of course more expansion of that in the future. But we are where we are. Fitness classes. We did a district-wide survey of our community schools and their parents and families, and what were the things that they wanted. And a lot of parents said what they wanted was fitness classes and weight loss classes, and how to quit smoking classes. I mean, just those types of things. So we're working with Parks and Recs to bring those to schools. One of the things that was interesting is that as we started to unpack the location that Recs and Parks puts programming, they're not at these schools. And they're not there because traditionally the families haven't paid to take part in those. And so they just quit offering them. So right now at Park Elementary and Brooklyn Park, we have just as many teachers there in the same room with parents taking Zumba. I mean, we're just trying to offer those things. We're using grant funds to pick that up. You don't have to pay the $25 for those 3 classes. We're going to take care of it. But I really like the park one, and that they're just the first one who's gotten off the ground with this, is because they intentionally got both the teachers and the parents to take that class together. And I just think that's so powerful, because now I might be next to my child's 3rd grade teacher, and we're getting to know each other on a different level. And I think that helps build trust and a feeling of just some amazing things that are happening, and just those little conversations. So that is starting. We have an MOU with the county Parks and Recs. We are working on one that replicates that with the city of Annapolis, that will allow us to pay for those types of things for our families, and to bring those programs to our schools that are identified as community schools. If we go over to the next quadrant, so I already talked about social workers, so excited. In addition to that, because of the funding of some of the schools, they had the funding, we are hiring 2 additional counselors for our schools, and we have 4 schools that have the funding to take their part-time psychologists and make them full-time. And so those are things that we're going to see in the future as that PPA, as that per pupil allocation increases a little bit each year. Schools are really analyzing what they need, and in this case, they're putting a lot of their energies there. We also do have some schools that are hiring some additional behavioral supports. One of the schools in their needs assessment, they had a lot of fighting. They had a lot of fighting that happened on the playground and those pieces. So they hired a TA, and his entire job after he went through restorative practices is he's the one out there doing that mediation, working with the kids, playing with the kids on a playground, just that one person who kind of helps them. And then we're looking at the data. And there are fewer fights of just trying to dedicate one person for that. And so that's something that other schools are trying to replicate. And we also are increasing the amount of trauma-informed instruction and other aspects of dealing with that professional development. I want to go to academic enrichment, because with COVID, it's just been hard. But this spring, our schools revved up to all types of after-school programming. We now have 84 clubs have been funded through community schools this year, primarily since January. I want you to think about that, primarily since January. But kids are in everything from chess club to the one that took me aback. I was like, what was it called? A nail club, a nail art club. And I was like, nail art? Are they nailing things? No, they're doing, how to decorate nails. And those girls just came out from everywhere. They wanted to be in that club. They're doing these for normally 3 to 6 weeks, getting all types of people to do some amazing things. A lot of soccer, just some really great things that are going on. So I'm very excited about that. Our program managers are loving that piece. Some learning environment improvements can be taken care of here. Field trips, we're starting to get back in the world. This is another thing we saw that came out of our survey with families. The number one thing that they said they wanted for their students, real world experiences. And that makes sense, right? For out of COVID, they're filling it out during the middle of COVID, and other choices are like, no, I want my kid to experience the world again. And so we're starting to do the field trips, really taking advantage of evening and weekend because of our challenges with buses. But we have a lot of weekend excursions that are happening with not only students, but with their parents. We have taken several buses of families to the African American History Museum. They eat lunch at the Lincoln Memorial, and then they come back. And we're working on those, a couple things. I just signed some bus forms today for Hershey Park on a Saturday in June. Yes, go with your family. It's a great time. We're providing that transportation. Kids are experiencing the world. The families are there. It's great. And so we're really excited about that. Supporting our kids in drama, music, and dance. A lot of the supplies that are there, and trying to do some incentives for our students for attendance. One thing that we are noticing is anecdotal data, but I've started to pull it. I'm a data person anyway, so I'm starting to pull all the data. And remember I talked about those clubs? We are now looking at the kids that we traditionally have on a, trying to monitor their attendance. The kids who are in the club who have a challenging history of attendance are coming to school on the days that they have clubs. And we now have that pretty much documented in 2 schools. And so now I'm pulling the other one. So they might not be coming the other 2 days, but they're coming on the days they have clubs. And I think that really means that we're making connections to kids and they're excited to do things. And so we really want to keep expanding that. So that's very, very exciting that we're seeing. And then over here, you see the 2+ generational supports, wonderful early childhood programs that are happening. We're doing bilingual story time, doing a lot of connections with the library. God bless librarians. They are just amazing. But just a lot of great programming, bringing families in for playtime. We only have 2 Judy centers right now in Anne Arundel County. And I was at one school recently, and a kindergarten teacher at a school that the Judy Center used to be there, it was no longer there. And she's like, yeah, I hear that we're going to try to start doing some of those programs that we did in the Judy Center through community schools. That's great, because I can tell a difference with my kindergartens now versus several years ago when I had a Judy Center. She could tell the difference. The kids under the Judy Center and those programs just came to school more ready to learn. And so we are replicating some of those programs where we can for that. This week, we have started 7 locations for basic English skills classes for our parents. We have a waiting list, and the community college could not give us any more instructors, or we would have filled them as well. We also have 2 classes starting that are basic computer skills classes that are starting for parents as well. We have several parenting classes. Unfortunately, the math classes that we wanted to offer did not fill. So I need a better way to excite adults to take a math class. So if anybody has any ideas, I'd love that. But that's going to be one of their first steps if they want to pursue a GED. And so we are working on those pieces as well. So lots of pieces with the community college. And I already mentioned the Parks and Recs opportunities. I have spoken for far too long. I'm going to come back to this slide, but then I want to open it up for any questions. And once again, I'm so excited that even during COVID, we are starting to do some really great things. Our schools are really, really working so hard. And so I can just imagine what next year is going to be. Hopefully start the school running, have a plan, and don't have to wait until some of the COVID restrictions end, because hopefully we are going to be in a really great spot. So with all of that, I'm going to actually quit sharing my screen so I can see everybody. And then if anybody has any questions, and I think I've gone over my time, so I do, please forgive me. But I don't know who raised their hand first. I see some hands raised and I just don't know. Is there a system to show?
Laura raised her hand first.
Okay.
And then Janet.
All right, Laura.
Figure out how to unmute myself. Thank you. This was awesome. And I totally understand why you're so excited about it, because I'm so excited about seeing all of these things. This is phenomenal, and it's exactly what we need in our community. The question I have is sort of that specific to the city of Annapolis. We fall in a strange gap because we are a little island within the county.
Mm-hmm.
So we always hear about these great programs that the county offers, but like maybe county park and rec is doing this, but the city park and rec isn't. We've run into that. Like we just at our last meeting, we actually had the director of the city park and rec, and we were talking about the fact that the way the aftercare is run, for example, is very different from the rest of the county than it is here. Signing up, the whole sign up process is different. So I guess my question is, I'm sure this is something that you guys are aware of, but how are you specifically targeting the gaps for the children here in Annapolis that fall in that sort of no man's land between what the county offers and what the city can actually deliver to them?
I think it's a great question. And so what I can say as the starting point is the MOU that we had signed with the county government technically covers the entire county, but they're short on staff. That's just a piece. That entire MOU is now in the hands of the Annapolis Parks and Recs, and we're hoping that to get that through, which just provides us with those same pieces, being very knowledgeable of there are certain areas that are serviced by different groups, by different agencies. And I know the focus here is on Annapolis, but it's interesting because there are so many resources. I'm not talking about the city, but there are far more civic resources here than there are, for example, in Glen Burnie. So they're having a different challenge of, wait a second, when people say, and I get them all the time, I get people going, I want to help, I want to help. Where do you want to help? Annapolis. And so I'm really struggling with trying to get Glen Burnie and all of them. And not to take away from your legitimate concern, but it's just interesting listening to the different concerns. So outside of that, I really would ask you for some thoughts there. So we definitely thought about Parks and Recs to try to make that applicable for after school. One of our schools is actually going to if it all goes well, they want to pilot what happens if in the community school strategy, we just kind of pay for the aftercare program with Parks and Recs and just for those kids. Because once again, just like the reason that they don't offer Zumba, they also don't offer before and aftercare because historically the families at those schools have not been able to pay for it. Now, that's a huge cost. So don't get too excited. I'm not talking about for 100 kids. I'm talking about for these 10 kids, what can we do? Or 15, because once again, opportunity costs with economics. But we're going to pilot that to see what that happens. So instead of waiting and begging somebody to come and do that, let's just say, hey, and so one of the schools is working with the county Parks and Recs to see if we can get that off the ground. And then we're thinking about perhaps going out on RFP for other things in the future as schools get more of that PPA money. That's another thing too. So they're going to get more money each year. And so once we get the social worker in place, once we expand the dental program, once we're able to get more counselors, et cetera, then there's still going to be more money. So we need to think about those other things. I know that wasn't totally the answer to that, but I'm wondering, what am I missing? So if I'm thinking about Parks and Recs, what are the other things that concern you about some of the things that you think students and families outside of the city get that you don't? Because I just need to know more about that so I can work as well on those partnerships.
It's a big opportunity gap that we see. Even like rec league sports, for example, is one that we've talked about here, where there just aren't as many opportunities. The county has a lot of rec leagues. In the city of Annapolis, there are travel leagues, for families that can afford to do those and can have transportation and can commit the time and energy. But we don't have a lot of opportunities for, like, say, our middle school kids. Like, where do they go after school? Like, right now, middle school, gets out at 3:00, and then a lot of these kids have nothing to do, and their parents are working and may not get home until 6:00 at night. Yeah. So where are these kids going in the interim? Like, where are they going if they need help with homework, or where are they going just to be not running around getting into trouble, be near healthy influences that can keep them busy and, so they can have fun too. So they don't feel like I go to school and the other kids are all talking about how they had a great time in their soccer league and I really like soccer, but there's no place for me to play.
Yeah.
So things like that. And I think the aftercare, that would be brilliant, honestly, just because if it's there and they said, I think the minimum, Archie last month said we needed 7 kids, I think. Yeah, and Chad's nodding, to start a program. So if we can get those 7 kids to enough to get the program up and running, then other parents who may not be aware of it, the sign-up process is really cumbersome in the city of Annapolis. They actually have to go in person to register at the Pitt Moyer Rec Center. as opposed to like countywide, they can just sign up at the
Online.
school where their kid attends.
Yeah.
You know, we have families that don't have credit cards. So how do they pay if they, you know, or they don't have computer access to sign up online? So how do we make it easy for them to sign up? So anything like that, that we can remove those barriers and say the program is here and make it as easy as possible for them to enroll their kids, then, you know, then the program is there. And I think it will keep rolling, but we have a lot of barriers to getting those set up.
So
Thank you.
thank you for that. I took a couple of notes, and so certainly working with opportunities to see what we can do for those pieces. But it sounds like a common theme of some frustration that exists in a few different places. So I appreciate that. Thank you. I don't know
Absolutely.
who
Thank
is
you.
next.
I'll pass my time over to Alexa because she has
Okay.
a chance to speak.
right.
yet.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this discussion. And so far the community schools program, our elementary school has started it this year, and it's been really wonderful overall. I mean, a lot of the pressure that was on the PTA before is now taken off of us because, you know, we did have the budget for it, but we don't have a lot of parental involvement for it. So it's been just really, really nice to have all these just wonderful things that are planned by somebody and organized well, and the communication has been very good. But I am wondering, there's been some growing pains with the PTA still does want to thrive as well. And so are the program managers encouraged to work closely with the PTA leaders and integrate budgets and make sure that both programs can thrive? Or that's just something that maybe we should work on, you know, probably it's school dependent as well. But can you comment on that?
Absolutely. I think all three of those are correct. So I think in one place, so and just knowing, and I'm not going to keep using COVID as an excuse, so please don't think that's it. It was just weird coming into this position or trying to start this in the middle of this. So one of the requirements of the community school grant is that there is a functioning parent organization at the school. And so we have talked about that, and in some cases, community schools might have opportunities to help incentivize and to support some other places for parents to be, you know, to attend and participate in those pieces. So we certainly want to do that, but from what you said, obviously we need to do some more work on that. I do know that this summer I have the program managers for 5 days, and I have a couple different topics, and one of them that I want to do some roundtable discussions with perhaps some community stakeholders. That's one of the topics is how do we make that relationship really strong so that both organizations and both pieces, because I don't even think about two organizations. We're just there to support a school. Right.
Exactly.
And this is what I always talk about. Yeah, this is also what I talk about with them with Title I. Title I's doing this piece. We need to be doing this piece. We're doing it together. We're just supporting a school. And so we're just spreading our resources there. And so as we think about that piece for this summer of some of those roundtables of helping our program managers in schools get really good plans for next year about how to support that. I'm encouraging them on getting some big calendars printed of putting like dates of other meetings. So I don't think they should have a steering committee meeting one night, a Title I advisory committee meeting on Tuesday, and then the PTA meeting on Wednesday. So what could we do to make it a really great evening for parents and others to come in where they're getting a little piece of all of that? Because Title I has federal rules of what you have to talk about that meeting. We have a few things so I'm trying to help, or we are working on really making everybody work smarter, not harder. So there's that piece. And you also said the other piece is that things just are school dependent. So the community school strategy is definitely to recognize that. But since you mentioned it, Alexa, I'm going to write down your name because I'm going to need some people to help with those rotations and really help our program managers know the different types of structures that our parent organizations have. Alexa, what school does your children go to? Just curious.
Annapolis Elementary.
Okay. All right. Excellent. All right. Thank you for that. So I don't have an answer, but you're going to help me work on that. So I appreciate it.
I'd love to.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jessica, I don't know who's next.
I think Janet was next.
Okay, Janet.
So quick question, does the requirement to have a parent organization require that it is an official PTA or PTO, just knowing how much IRS paperwork and
Yeah.
work there are with those type of things. I know they're hard to accomplish.
So the legislation does say a parent organization, because ultimately the steering committee has to have a representative from the parent organization. So they do not call out a PTA or PTO. So we just need some type of organizational structure in some way.
Okay.
So yeah, at least that's what it is from a legal standpoint.
Okay, so maybe that it would be easier to achieve if it was just some like, parent booster group
Yeah.
type.
Mhm.
They didn't have to be fiduciary responsible and all these rules and paperwork regulations, and the community schools could kind of organize the pots of money that you have, but the parent thing could gin up volunteers and other things.
Mhm.
We do have some of our schools that have a severe challenge keeping a PTA.
Mhm.
But if it could be just a parent booster group, then that would be great. Also, just wanted to ask, what are Judy centers?
Excellent question. So Judy centers are places, there's a state grant for Judy centers. Under Blueprint, we can expand that number. Unfortunately, we don't have any space. But so if we get space, we would. So Judy centers are places where basically families with toddlers who primarily are probably, I don't want to use the phrase living in poverty, but need more supports primarily, and that's who we target to come in. But they come in for classes. They have programming with how do you help kids work with manipulatives and tiles, and how do you read to kids, and those types of things. And there's just some really great parts of that programming. Like I said, it is a state grant, and we have two. We have one at Georgetown East Elementary and the other one at Belgrove. And what inspires me about Belgrove is what happened. I just said we don't have room for Judy centers. We also don't have room for community school program managers. There's not space for their offices. But what we were able to do at Belgrove was to actually take the portable that's being used for the Judy Center, and it's become the community schools / Judy Center place. And it is magical because they're able to work with all those together. But that's what a Judy Center is. So we hope to be able to expand that in the future, but the reality is of space. And as we're expanding pre-K and other things, we just don't have space. And program managers right now, they're great sense of humor. They're working in closets, honest to God. So
No, I believe it. I totally believe it. Is that spelled J-U-D-Y?
J-U-D-Y, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you. Jessica?
So first of all, I just wanted to briefly show everybody, if you can see, because I have my blur on, but that is my son with biscuits he just made while I was on this meeting in his cooking club from our community school cooking club, our virtual cooking club.
Yay, yay.
And that's one of those examples I just wanted to show everyone, because it's a cool example of, here, they look like real biscuits. They are real biscuits. I ate one when I was off camera.
Awesome.
It's one of those examples. The club has really been a great thing. So this is a virtual cooking club. They provided all of everything that you might need, including a hand mixer and everything for the kids. And so on Wednesdays for an hour and a half, they have a chef who is on their laptop and teaches them how to cook, which is pretty cool. So I just wanted to, I love that esports a community school, and I love the whole concept of the community school program. When we redistricted a few years ago, this was really what we worked for, because at that time, a lot of our schools had a lot of busing going on. And so it really broke up the communities. And so we wanted that. The busing is one thing I wanted to talk about when we're talking about, issues within the schools and challenges that the students are having. I was wondering, so how does the community, how are there issues that are coming up? Obviously each cluster is different, and obviously the Annapolis cluster is very different than all the other clusters, right? And every other cluster, and I'm sure that you're seeing needs that are specific to the Annapolis, as you were saying, that there are some civic groups here, but then we're missing other things. For example, that same son goes to South River High School to run track, because that's the only opportunity in the area for him to run track. But so how do you, how does the community schools program, first of all, make sure that it's not saying cookie cutter, well, if this happens at Van Bachlen, it has to happen at Eastport, or it has to happen at Annapolis, right? So that, are you making sure that there's enough fluidity between what's being done, so it's specific to the exact needs of the community and not taking away from that? And then when issues are identified, right? So in the Annapolis cluster, transportation, long before community schools, was identified as an issue that is a barrier to attendance, right? The lack of transportation in our urban schools is a barrier to attendance at our urban schools, because we have to follow the same rules as the suburban schools. Sorry, all the beeping, but it's different. Is that something that community schools can do on the advocacy side? Is that something that you do? And is there a way that, you know, within our cluster and having so many community schools, we as the and Education Commission can assist you with that, or, you know, that type of thing?
So great question. So a couple of different answers to that piece. So each school does have to do their their needs assessment. But with that said, once somebody has a really cool thing like the virtual cooking club, other community schools are like, oh, wait a second, I want to try to do that. So we don't discourage people from stealing ideas, but we do want them to be really mindful of something might be really popular in one place and fill a need, but not fill a need in somewhere else, because people and students and families just aren't interested. So they're being mindful of that. But as they're just now building their program, there's a lot of, oh, you use artsy partsy for your program, I want to use artsy partsy. You use what for this program? So we're stealing that, and I think that's fine as they get started. But ultimately, as they build that implementation plan, it has to be based very specifically on the needs that they've identified for their specific community and their students. So as we identify challenges, no matter what they are, certainly, so this is another reality of the community school can't do everything. So the community school, when you said for advocacy, we can certainly highlight that there's an issue. We can be a host for people who want to come in and problem solve, but ultimately we cannot change, you know, if there's an issue, you mentioned transportation or something else, there are some things that we are not, you know, doesn't make sense for some of us to do, right? So right now I'm getting a lot of things about housing. I'm like, it's great, we can be a great support, we can do that connection of who in the community is responsible or can help ideally with housing, but ultimately, like the law has very specific things we can and can't spend money on, and we can't spend money to help people who need emergency housing. It's just not part of those things, but we should have that list of who do we help you contact for that. And so you have a much bigger question that maybe we need to unpack a little bit more of whatever those needs are, right? So in that case, I do know, you know, Eastport does have some definite challenges with transportation, and another place might have definite challenges for, like I said, with housing insecurity or something like that. So we certainly try to connect them with the governmental resources that are there. One of the things that I do spend a lot of time with is trying to go through what a community school is not. And a community school is not, we can't be the necessarily, you know, we can't necessarily solve all those problems. We're the connectors. We're trying to connect the community resources. And when it's all said and done, we might not have the best community resources. So that's a different advocacy, right? So if I'm having a problem with housing or whatever, and that's just not strong. And I know you're talking about school transportation, but I know transportation as a whole throughout the county is something that comes up all the time, public transportation. We can't provide public transportation, but we can highlight and try to get those conversations started to say this is being a barrier to the education of our students or getting families to be able to come to school because they don't have access to those things. So with that said, it's really about being the connector and providing a space for people to have those conversations. And yep, there are lots of challenges, and we're going to try to focus on you know, what we can in the different places of what we can control, but then provide space for people to have those conversations and advocate for other things.
Okay, that's great. And I want to also emphasize what Alexa's had to say. I think, you know, some of the community schools have not had strong parent organizations, and some of them have had parent organizations. And I think it's really important for all of the ones, especially those that have existing parent organizations, to not see the parent organizations as a competition, but to see them as a thing to work together, right? So, and I know it's hard when new programs are starting and there's a lot of things, but for the longest time, particularly in the Annapolis cluster, the PTAs have been those connectors. The PTAs are the one that when there's a need, they're the one that finds the company or the organization that can help with housing, or if there's a fire, they're the ones, right? So I would like to advocate that there's definitely, you know, a more of an emphasis on involving the PTA and involving and using the connections that they already have and creating those
Absolutely.
connections, because otherwise what you're going to do is you're going to lose all of the families that are part of the PTA or that have been really involved, because they're going to feel disenfranchised from the whole system, and that's not going to help. And so I just wanted to throw that out there.
And I really appreciate that, because the intent here is never to replace that piece. And so the intent would be, so we would serve as a connector, because we know that the PTA has somebody who's really strong and knows about this. So that's really what we should be thinking about, is how, you know, the PTA is another resource for our families and our students, and the community school is the connector to wherever that is. So I do really appreciate you clarifying that a little bit more on top of what Alexa said, so I can really think about how to approach that with our current and new program manager, so we can strengthen the support for the school regardless of where that support's coming from. But at no point should the community school program manager become, this is the conversation I have, you're not the social worker, you're making the connection to the social worker. You're not the ESOL teacher, you're making the connection to the ESOL teacher. You're not the track coach. You're somebody who's a former state awarding track coach. You're not the track coach anymore, but you're making a connection for that. And so I think that's something that we will continue to work on, but thank you for that. I don't know if it hadn't been for tonight, I would have made a strong, put as much time as I think I need to put into our time together this summer with program managers to talk about that. So I really do appreciate that perspective. All right. I don't know who's next, Ms. Oaks. I don't know when you're kicking me off. So I don't know all the questions. So I'm gonna, I don't know who is next. Jamie, were you next? And Ms. Oaks
Odessa?
was- Oh, Odessa, I'm sorry.
I think
Yes,
Odessa
ma'am.
was next.
Oh,
Okay, thank you.
No, go ahead, Jamie. Go ahead.
Sorry, sure. Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So just to piggyback off, my question was actually like tied to the PTA situation also, because my kids are at Germantown and we are working really closely with Mr. James and the
Yeah.
PTA, which is great, the communication between everyone. My PTA does have a couple questions just about I guess, I know you've talked about the 5-year strategy, which was great to clarify all of that, but what happens after that?
Mhm.
What are the next steps? Because we do want to work on budgeting with the community schools and stuff, but we want to know, like, is this something that can be taken away eventually? Is this going to be here for the long haul, et cetera? And I know that might not be something you can answer, but I'd just like to know a little idea of what that looks like.
So that's a great question. So under the legislation for Blueprint, this is a permanent way it's a permanent fund until they change Blueprint, right? So if they come around with the next piece, Odessa talked about the Thornton Commission, the Kerwin Commission, there's going to be another one. So hopefully we've created such an amazing program that the outcry would be so horrible if anyone tried to change in the future. But after 5 years, Jamie, what they do is they have to reevaluate their needs. They have to, start, where have they been, and kind of create a new plan. It's not, I have the same plan that'll be for 10 years. It's just that cycle of identifying your goals, very specific goals, because our program managers now have like 15 goals. I'm like, too many. Let's focus on a couple of goals and get through there. So I didn't mean to make anyone think that after 5 years it goes away. So as long as the Kerwin funding stays the way it is, this program is part of that funding formula.
Great, thank you.
All right. And last but not least, Odessa.
Okay, I'm back.
Yes, ma'am.
The slide that you show with the 12 people, are they managers for different areas or what?
Yes, ma'am. So every school has a program manager. And so the slide that I showed, each of them is their full-time job is dedicated to one school. And their job is to bring together community resources in those 4 pillars with our students and families who need them.
Okay, because Annapolis is a very unique area. We have a high poverty,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of low income housing. And who's the program manager for the Annapolis district or area?
So each of the schools in Annapolis that are our program or our community schools have a unique program manager. So for example, we just talked about Germantown, Mr. James. So Trayvon James is the program manager at Germantown Elementary. We have a different program manager for Eastport, a different one for Annapolis Elementary. Tyler Mills, Georgetown East, et cetera. So there's not one for the entire Annapolis area. It's the schools that are in Annapolis. If they are a community school, then they have a community school program manager.
But shouldn't Annapolis be treated as one because of the high poverty, the low income housing and all of that? And, it just seems as though to me that, like I said, the problems that the Annapolis district has, or the Annapolis area has, it's just probably across the board in Annapolis, in all the schools, pretty much, maybe not Rolling Knolls or something like that. So I'm just thinking in my mind, like we need to deal with this generational poverty in order to try to have the wraparound services that these kids need in the school. You can take out Rolling Knolls and maybe what's that one over West Annapolis, but other than that, I mean, there's a lot of poverty in these schools and low income housing, and the parents are struggling. So they need these wraparound services, and I haven't heard you say too much about Annapolis and the type of services that it will get as a whole, because there are a lot of poverty. I see it on a regular basis.
Odessa, I can speak as a parent at a community school. Sorry, I just want to say, Shannon, that one of the great things is that the different schools, right? So each different school, though we have similar things across each of our schools in the Annapolis cluster, there are different schools that have different needs, right? So Mills Parole, a lot of their kids who are in poverty don't live near the school. Eastport, they do live near the school. Tyler Heights has a big English language learner population, right? So there's all these different needs. And so the wraparound services, so they are bringing in the wraparound services. In fact, if you wanted to come in one day to Eastport, I'd be happy to go in and walk around and introduce you to Miss Bell. And she can show you the wraparound services. So we have a nurse full-time in the office now, which has really been great. And there's a lot more going on with, connections back to the house, to the homes and working. We have a community navigator from HACA that works and comes in and works with Miss Bell and talks to Miss Bell. So I'd love to do that if you want to one day, come and visit Eastport and we can do that.
Well, I'm just saying, because I'm a grassroots person. I work in the communities. I work with the mothers and the children. And even though I'm hearing about these services in the school, there's a much higher demand in these neighborhoods. Like I said, that one mother was placed in extended living or something like that off of River Road with no transportation, no food, no anything. And then she's saying that Hillsmere is not even a school that's going to be giving community and school notation. So I don't know. It just seems as though to me that because we have these low income neighborhoods in just about every school district, school area, that we should be really, are we studying, the needs of these kids in all these different schools and the families? Because a lot of these parents don't have transportation. They can't come out to PTA meetings and things like that because there's not really much of a draw there.
So at Eastport, they're providing transportation and they're bringing parents in for various meetings. And like last Friday night, we had dinner at the school and there was education for the parents. And then there were activities for the kids to really get the parents into the school and get some one-on-one time with the parents to create those connections. So, I can speak, that's what I can speak to about Eastport.
So
But
I
I
guess,
think
I guess
Odessa's
this
got the right point. Yeah.
I guess this program is pretty much new because it sure isn't trickling up at the high school level. I mean, the high school is struggling. I mean, you all may not hear about it, but I'm hearing about all kind of problems at the high school. So I guess because it's just starting out the communities in school that it's not at the high school because 3 fights a day or 3 and 4 fights a week. I mean, that's a lot. There's some serious problems going on at the high school. So maybe, over the years, the elementary schools will, be different or make a difference. But right now, what are we doing for these kids at the high school or middle school?
I think to go to Odessa's point, Hillsmere will never qualify as a community school or Title I school, but we have kids from Robin Wood so desperately need these services. So that is the gap in Annapolis.
Ditto over at Monarch, because we have a lot of kids at Monarch that are coming from Robin Wood in these communities, and they're over there, and that's also not on the list. So,
So there are certain.
I got a phone call today saying that there were 3 fights at Annapolis High School. What are we doing? Go ahead.
So when we're talking about Annapolis High School or others, so we certainly still have supports within the county for those pieces. But as the legislation is written for the community schools and then the identification of those through the state grant and funding formula, that we have the restrictions that we have. So it focuses on schools that have very high concentrations of poverty. And to your point, one of the beauties, and I do thank Jessica for bringing up some pieces. Well, one of the beauties is that we do focus on what individual schools need, but also to your point, when we do meet as teams, we have, I talked about the regional focus of it. So the Annapolis program managers do meet together. The Glen Burnie or the North County program managers do meet together. The Meade program managers do meet together. And so we are trying to tackle some of those things that happen geographically or regionally as well. But the reality is as well is that the focus is really on the students within that particular school. Dr. Tobin mentioned on one of the slides, and I didn't really talk about it, that 100% of the funding has to go to the school. So it varies school focus. So the students in that school, students in this school. And so ideally, the point is as we build these sort of services and supports for students in elementary school, or in some cases in middle school, once Annapolis Middle becomes eligible, what we're going to have then is hopefully we built in supports and structures that students as they move forward will have less challenges in some of the things that you're mentioning there. Okay. All right, Ms. Oaks, I know I went way over my time, and so I really do appreciate it. And anyone can certainly, I will send the PowerPoint once I fix the date, there was a mistake, to you, and you can send that out. But I am spugh@aacps.org, and please feel free to reach out to me.
One thing I wanted to say, Ms. Pugh, is just please remember that we are here, right? When you're talking about the connectors, I mean, that our job as our mission, as the Education Commission is to work to find resources for, and educational opportunities and facilities for the citizens of Annapolis. So that's what we're here for. So whatever we can do to help you with what is needed or individual schools with what's needed, please remember that we're here because.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pugh. It was such a pleasure having you join us tonight, and we appreciate you staying for all our questions.
Awesome. So I'm going to head home. I have 2 dogs that are probably wondering what on earth is happening because I'm still in my office. So I will. I look forward to seeing you, I'm sure, again in the future. So I appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Oaks, for the invitation, and thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Okay, next up is approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
I'll move. I have one. There was one thing. I think Betsy McKeon's name was spelled wrong. She's in there as Betsy McKenna, and it should have been Betsy McKeon. Sorry, I just noticed that when I was looking through it earlier, and I didn't have a chance to email you.
Do you know how to spell the last name?
Yeah, it's MC capital K, wait, hang on.
KEAN.
KEON, I believe.
Okay,
Yeah, KEON.
We are not
Okay.
on the minutes yet, but thank you.
okay, thank you.
So I second the approving the agenda.
Are there any objections to approving the agenda? Great. Agenda is approved. Moving to March minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'm motion to approve the minute. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, we were on, you said agenda and I heard minutes.
I second approving the minutes. They were well done.
Are there any objections to approving the minutes? Okay, minutes approved. Do we have any other public testimony?
India, how you doing, India? Are we going to be talking about the superintendent? I mean, any kind of feedback? What's going on with the search? Anything like that at the next meeting, maybe?
Yeah.
Or update? You know, I know you've been attending the meetings. Is there any update? Or what kind of I guess what characteristics are we looking for? I mean, I'm just surprised that there hasn't been much conversation about the superintendent, the new superintendent to come on board.
We can get an update next time.
Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Tobin had to leave. I know, I know that India mentioned the last time, right, that she was part of the interview process, or was that between the last meeting and now? I can't remember. But I know that from what I was reading and from what's been, there was a good article on it that was done by Rick Hutzel. And that basically, the focus right now, Odessa, is the committee or the search, the consultant that's been hired, the consultant team that's been hired is searching nationwide. And then they're going to bring candidates forth to the committee that they, based on all of the answers, they're going to bring candidates forth to the committee, and then the committee brings them to the board, and that's the process. So I think the public side of the process is over until the candidates are brought forth to the board and there's a public hearing at the board.
Do you think we'll have one by the end of the school year? Is Dr. Alato leaving at the end of the school year, or?
His contract ends July 1st, or I think July 1st, or June 30th. So yes, will we have one by the end of the year? I don't know. Dr. Tobin could speak. I know that in a lot of school systems, what they end up doing is having an interim superintendent for a year while they finish the search. Like that's what Montgomery County did. A lot of the school systems around us that have had similar situations, but I don't know what's happening here.
Okay, thank you, Jeff.
Moving to committee reports. I will just open the floor to all committees if anyone has any updates.
I just wanted to mention, 2 minutes before the meeting, I sent around to the whole commission the Delegate Dana Jones scholarship application for our high school seniors who are pursuing additional college or certification programs within Maryland. And that closes on May 13th. So please help any students that you know of that could benefit from that. Senator Elfreth has one, and Delegate Henson has one and stuff, but Delegate Jones's one is the latest deadline. So please help people apply for that. It's real. It's nice money for the people who get it. I just had a University College Park student call me and tell me he had gotten it and made a big difference to their family. So help those and circulate that within your communities and stuff. And also I'll put it on the Annapolis High PTSA Facebook page, and your constant reminder to go there and keep looking for all the great things that Ms. Hogan is posting for, adult jobs, adult training, summer programs. She's really packing good information there. Thank you.
Any other committee updates?
I want to say that for transportation, if you didn't get a chance to read Rachel Pacella's article yesterday in the Capitol, please make sure you do. It's a really good in-depth investigation into the situation with the buses for the entire cluster. And I think it's really important to realize that, as she points out, 16% of the Annapolis cluster routes were missed from the beginning of school until the end of February. And I think that's really important because Annapolis Bus Company has 16% of all the routes, and they miss 16% of their routes, while Smith, which is another company which services a different cluster, has 22% of the routes, and they only miss 6% of the routes. There's a lot of issues there, and there's a lot of concern why our particular contractor failed so badly this year, and how much that affected our students. Attendance, as we've talked about multiple times, as Dr. Pugh just said, that's a huge issue here. And when our own school system and their contractors are putting up the barriers to our kids attending school, that's a problem. And especially when it's so directly and so much affecting the Annapolis cluster. So I think it's hard right now, with the change in administration to really know which way to go. I do know that I really want to continue trying to advocate for changing the radius for the schools within Annapolis City. Every year I am more and more convinced, and by what I'm seeing in all of my children, I now have children in all 3 levels of the school system in the Annapolis cluster, and by how much of a barrier the lack of school transportation is to our kids getting to school. And if we want to eliminate the achievement gap, that seems like a fairly easy thing that we could fix to make a huge change for our schools, right? Like, if it's easy for them to get to school, then they're going to be more likely to go to school, which means that they are going to do better in school, which means that it's going to be better for everyone. And that doesn't require some monumental change at a federal or state level. That requires just extra bus routes or extra stops for kids.
Jess, also bringing in that great article mentioned that maybe about the issue of needing to opt in to the transportation for each student. And I think we need to start spreading that word early for our families to realize that and really get that information out there to other decision makers and other people who talk across the.
I really, and I know there's different opinions on our commission, but I really wish at least it was an opt out. Because as we, just even getting the farms forms in, right? It is so difficult to get something that is so integral to kids getting food every day, right? And then something like it just makes it so hard. And when it's a technology thing, I don't know how many parents I've talked to, for example, that had a problem accessing their children's report cards today when they came out. The technology is hard, right? And when you have families, I think I know it is a hard thing for people who don't experience this on a regular basis, but when you have, when you're working on when you're living in a way that maybe your phone doesn't work for a week at a time, right? You don't have the money to pay for it and your phone is off, which happens all the time, right? It happens all the time to multiple of my friends and my kids' friends and my friends and families. And then you miss a whole week's worth of text messages, or you miss a whole week's worth of whatever, however you're supposed to, especially when your phone is your access to technology. And, and that's, it's a normal expected, not expected, but it's a normal thing. So your phone's dead for a few days, and then you are able to pay the bill when the next check comes in, right? When you live paycheck to paycheck, that's how life is. And the system that we have currently for communication, and so heavily relying on technology, and then that opt-in transportation system, guys, can I think can be really detrimental to our families, who need this most. That's so.
Agreed. And if we can find out more and work with the transportation department and say, like, don't give people a 3-week window to answer this survey at the end of the summer. Like, if you're going to start in May, and let people have a long time to tell you what they're doing next year.
Any other committee updates? Okay, we don't have any unfinished business, so moving to new business. Starting with the upcoming officer elections next month, similar to last year, we will open up nominations for chair, vice chair, and secretary until the time of voting next month. So what that means is you can nominate someone right now. Email me nominations in the next 4 weeks, or make a nomination at the May meeting. And for clarity, any nominations made before the May meeting will be included in our reminder email, so it's fully transparent who has been nominated. But again, you still can nominate up until the actual vote next month. Does anyone has any questions?
Yeah, India, when is my position up? I should know this, right? But I don't know. Do you know when is my position up?
This June.
This June?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I run again? Oh, no. Okay, India, I may be annoying and get on your nerves some more.
I have a question if we have any more positions or people who have stated interest.
Yeah.
Just hasn't been funneled up to us from the city yet, or is anybody in the waiting period? Do we have any more folks?
Well, Mr. Starks, he hasn't been around. I guess I need to call him and find out. I guess I'm in a meeting. I guess we need to try to figure out who's going to stay and who isn't going to stay.
Odessa, just also, this is, she was asking about elections, not about staying on the commission. When what she was talking about was just the elections for the chair and the vice chair and the secretary, not for staying on the commission. No, she did send an email out if you want to stay, to let her know that you want to stay on the commission. So if you,
okay.
I mean, I think that you just said that, so.
Okay, so,
but
the election, election is about the commission? Is the election about the commission?
Yeah,
I apologize, guys, because I don't know what's going on.
Well, we don't want to elect people who aren't planning on staying. So,
okay,
that's a good commingled. They're kind of a
idea.
commingled issue. Like, and
That's
is anybody
vice chair and secretary?
Well, I don't know.
So that's why I was asking, is there anybody coming up who might be coming on in June that would be suitable or considering these officer positions?
You're saying, are there any new applications? Is that what you're asking?
Kenu Smith Brown.
For what position or ward?
But Jessica, how many positions do we have open though? I mean, do we have any at large seats and ward seats open?
Yes, Indy is typing right now, so I'll let her speak.
Okay.
He would be at large, replacing Ken Starks, who is leaving. And we also have Ward 1 open.
Okay. Ward 1, where is that located?
Downtown Annapolis. Alexa Waltz lives in Ward 1.
Who?
I don't know that.
Alexa, who spoke earlier.
Thanks,
Oh,
Jess. I'm still listening, even though you can't see me. I'm just making dinner. I'm aware of where I live, Jess.
You can run, but you can't hide from Jess.
No, I can't. I really can't. We text each other at midnight often.
So is she leaving? Is Alexa leaving?
No, Alexa has been active and coming. I can't actually talk about her anymore because my Amazon device keeps talking to me about her. But I'm in the wrong room. The other ones are all set not to talk about her when I say her name. She's come to the last couple of meetings, and I was just giving her a hard time, Odessa, because she is not currently on the commission, but she does live in Ward 1 and has been very active at Annapolis Elementary School and in education in general.
Oh, okay. So it's only one, there's that at-large seat that's open. That's all? That's it, Ken Starks? The at-large
And
seat?
Ward 1,
And Ward 1?
right, Ken Starks and Ward 1.
Okay.
Well, and then Kayla is left. So Kayla is a senior. So I'm assuming that her seat will also come open, but then we're going to discuss that in the next agenda item too.
I can recommend a student. Mm-hmm.
I would rather not speculate on other spots, so can we move on?
Of course.
Okay, so the next, can I bring that up, India? So then the next thing on the agenda is something that I wanted to bring up. 4 years ago, when we had the leisure and learning transition team. Can you guys go talk in the kitchen? Sorry, I'm just put my headset in because there's talking. When we had the leisure and learning transition team, we discussed, are you guys able to hear me now? One of the recommendations that we made, I'm pulling it up so I have it, was as a do it now type of recommendation to address having a broader voice on our commission, was that we add 5 positions to the commission. And tonight I want to just talk about adding 3 positions to commission. Though I'll talk about, I'll tell you about all of the ones that we recommended adding. And so I have loved having a student voice on the commission. I think it's really important. I would like to make, what I want to talk about tonight is making a motion that we ask city council to add 3 student positions, permanent student positions to the commission, so that the student position doesn't also take away from a ward position, because I think it's also really important to have an adult voice in it for the ward itself, right? Because there's obviously differences. But I would like to make a motion that the commission, I don't know, is it that the commission asks, or that the commission requests that city council add 3 positions to the Annapolis Education Commission, a student representative from Bates, a student representative from Annapolis Middle School, and a student representative from Annapolis High School, to be selected by the schools, the students at the school at the beginning of each year, or I guess probably at the end of the year for the following year.
For 1-year terms.
For 1-year terms, yes. Pam, did you get that, or do you need me to re-say that?
I was through today.
Right. Jess, do you definitely want to say that they have to be selected by the students at the school, instead of just like those who are at the, like, make it aware that this opportunity is available and those who are interested can submit their name?
Because if you make it
It's true.
by the school, then you're putting the burden on the school to have, I guess, an election or have
Right, like a right.
process. So
Right.
it might be easier if, if the principal were to select a student or, a couple of students and say, hey, are any of you interested in this? It might be a lot easier for the
Yeah.
schools to actually do that.
Yeah,
That's fine.
Okay.
So I make a motion that the Annapolis Education Commission requests that the Annapolis Education Commission requests that City Council add 3 positions to the Annapolis Education Commission, 3 student positions for a term of 1 year to the Annapolis Education Commission, to include
Voting positions.
What's that?
Voting positions.
Voting positions, yes. Full positions. 3 full voting 1-year positions. I should write this down. Unless you're writing it down, Pam, you want to put it all together in a way.
I'm
that
trying to
makes
get
sense.
it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike was sick today, so the time that I had thought that I was going to spend writing it out disappeared in the ether.
Okay, so that the commission requests that the city council adds 3 student full voting positions to the AEC for the term of 1 year, with a student coming from Annapolis Middle, Bates Middle, and Annapolis High School.
Coming from each, I think the word each, right? So that the way that it's written doesn't make it sound like we're only doing it for 1 year, right? I mean, 1 year forever.
1-year term.
1-year
One year
term.
term.
1-year term.
1-year term, permanent positions of 1-year term each. When you're done making the motion, I have a discussion question before we vote.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Discussion is open.
So I think that's a interesting and potentially useful adding these positions. My concern would be if we add these number of positions, does that then changes the number of people required for quorum to have a valid meeting at which motions can be passed? And so, we have a variety of members that, don't show up for whatever reason. during the year. And so, and with students, I just don't want us to bureaucratically harm ourselves by having 3 additional members that ups our quorum and we get into that tricky spot.
So this would bring us to 16. So we would need to have 8 to make quorum as it is now, although we could request as part of this so some of the commissions that are in the city code have their quorum defined. So we could request that a quorum be defined as 1/3 of the seated members present at a meeting, rather than half. Like ours isn't defined, so we have to go for ours by the generally acceptable decision of quorum. Because I remember, Laura, we went through this last year or
Yeah.
the year before last. But if we ask them as part of this to then define what quorum is for the Education Commission. So if
Yeah.
we were to say, well, 1/3 isn't, 1/3 would be like half of a person, but
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
like 6 people. Or 5 people.
That would be,
Now we need 7, so we are only looking at 1 more if we stayed at majority.
but many months we're scraping to get that 7 voting members. So I just don't want it to jeopardize our work because we don't go in the summer much. I mean, each meeting needs to be valid and move us forward in ways.
I think we
So-
almost always have 6. So would 6 be, 6 is a little bit larger than 1/3 of the
Yeah.
of the commission.
That would be a preferable approach for me. And I know I have phoned in from vacations a number of times.
So I think that would be
City in
an,
Las Vegas wanted,
right.
because
I
we
think
needed
that
quorum.
I think that would be an additional motion,
Okay,
right? Because that would be an additional addition to the code, I would think. I mean, I guess we could
but
combine it
it's
in.
tied into adding 3 more members.
Well, true.
Automatically changes our quorum as it's currently written. So if you're going to,
And defining quorum as 6 people. So at the end, and defining quorum as 6 members present, 6 seated members present.
And right now, we don't know if we can vote tonight.
Right, because we've lost people, right?
is quorum counted at the beginning of a meeting
Oh, we have 7 now, though.
when attendance is taken?
Oh, no.
Oh, we have 6.
And is a seated member, has to be a voting member? Seated means voting? And right, is the quorum taken at the beginning of the meeting or is it at the moment of voting?
I do not know the answer to those questions. You know what? Can we actually change it to, instead of 6, to at least 1/3? Because, there have been times when we've only had half of our members seated. Right? There have been times when we've had multiple vacancies. And if we have, so maybe can we change it to at least 1/3 of the seated members present?
Can you, okay, so that's the second motion.
No, that would be at the end of that
Okay.
one.
all
And
right,
to define quorum as at least 1/3 of the seated members present.
I was going to double check afterwards, but we can still vote as a tentative measure.
And what does the tentative measure do? It's more of a suggestion than a motion?
If the vote is allowed, then it stays as a vote.
So next month we'd have to affirm the tentative measure. Or just, that's,
Probably pending interpretation by the city lawyer or something. Thank you.
I would check Robert rules about timing of quorum.
What were you thinking? Mom, I wanna tell you something. Mom. Mom. What did you want to say?
Any other discussion?
Okay, no, okay, I think I have the essence. I'm trying to figure out how to indicate that each of the students will be representing one the high school, one at Annapolis Middle, one at Bates Middle, without it being too wordy, but to the point. I have the commission request that City Council add 3 student full voting positions to the AEC for 1-year terms, representing Annapolis High School, Annapolis Middle School, and Bates Middle School. Is that clear enough for? And to
That
define,
works.
okay, and then, so we're still waiting on the quorum part, right?
Right.
All in favor?
Wait, I thought
We
we were,
decided on the quorum.
we're including quorum and
And to,
the next
and
sentence.
to define quorum to
Yes.
at least 1/3 of seated
Of the
members
seated
present.
position.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Odessa, did you hear that?
Is it him or?
Yes, I.
The kids' function.
What's in there?
Seeing all voting in favor, motion passes for now.
Okay, I'm sorry, was that 6 votes? I couldn't,
Yes.
okay.
So I just want to, the other suggestion that was made was to, and I don't know at this point how I feel about it, but was to include one of the 2 CAC reps and one of the 2 PIAC reps as members, but given that we don't have any role in whether they're seated or whether they're not seated, I don't know how valid or but I do think we should invite them all the time.
I would agree on inviting them, encouraging strongly to participate, but I would not put additional positions. toward them.
And just so everybody, these were the other suggestions. I'm just going to read them just so you can think about them. Or what is to increase the required number of aldermen on the commission to 3, and or to create a direct link between the Annapolis Education Commission and the City Council through a standing committee to which AADC chairs reports monthly, either an existing one, possibly Housing and Human Welfare, or a new one that represents both recreation and education, given the many links between the 2. This was, the transition team was both, this particular one was both education and recreation. So that spoke to a lot of what was being talked about in this report. So that was one of the things, because right now we don't, the other commissions, they report to someone. And in our case, Alderman Finlayson is on the commission, but we don't really report to her, and she doesn't do reports to the council for us, right? So I feel like, so that was part of the the discussion was, how to make sure that there is a standing link between what we do here and what happens at city council, and so that they're aware of that. The next one was to require that any legislation discussing education, educational facilities, or any other topic in this field be brought up to the commission for discussion and recommendations. And require twice yearly in-person reports to city council. From these, the mayor will make recommendations regarding education priorities in the city to the superintendent, meeting with them at least twice a year, meeting with the superintendent at least twice a year. So those were there was just, I think, trying to give a little more backbone to the commission so that we can have a better chance at fulfilling our mission.
And more connection. Those are.
And more connection, right? Because sometimes I don't know if the whole city council knows there's an education commission. And, so for example, I was talking to one of the aldermen the other day about the workforce housing and the role of the adequate school facilities has never been discussed in any of the workforce housing and the zoning changes and the possibilities of that, right? So that's part of the thing. If you're going to make a change that may affect adequate public facilities as it relates to schools, we should be aware of that so that we can also inform the committees that are working on that about what we know in our side, right? And the research and the work that we've done. And that may be something next month, India, if we could ask Dewan to come and give, he's the head of that, he's the chair of that. If we could ask him to come and give an update before things get voted on, because we need to make sure that if they're going to do something like what happens with town centers where the schools are exempt or the school facilities are exempt, we need to know about that and have a conversation about it.
Mm-hmm. Great point. I would also encourage our PTA leaders to take advantage of the public testimony portion of city council meetings. I did that when we were trying to raise money for support a senior program at Annapolis High, because it is just like the council needs to have us in front of their face more. And just reacquaint with what's going on in the schools from our perspective and what we need and what kind of support we could use. So as many opportunities as you have to just show up sign up for public testimony, please do so.
I agree. I really would like to figure out how we can get more PTA.
Yeah, because it also brought in additional money donations from anonymous donors and stuff, because certain people are out there watching the city council meeting that may not have any connection with education in the town. They hear things. So let's bring it to as broad an audience as we can.
Anything else before we adjourn?
I just want to read one of the things that was a short-term goal. And I just want to point out that this was 5 years ago. Accessibility to programs is crucial for all ages. The transportation department should revisit all bus routes to ensure convenient access for residents to all education facilities, including Annapolis High School, Annapolis Middle School, Bates, libraries, and community centers. Maybe I just define the mission of the transportation committee going forward.
Good reminder. Thank you.
The more things change.
The more things change, the more they stay the same, huh?
Exactly.
Any objection to adjourn?
Nope. I did want to open up, actually, Odessa, I had said that if anyone is interested in meeting me at Eastport one day and talking to Miss Bell, I'd be happy to set that up and, learning
Is she the principal?
no, Miss Bell is our community program manager. And it might be, maybe we could do a little, a tour, go to Tyler Heights as well, because they've been working at this for an additional year longer. And just see what the different schools, remember back during redistricting, we were doing that, visiting the different schools. I mean, we used to visit them in general, but to have it, just to see how the community schools are currently being implemented. And what.
Yeah, I'm happy to have people come to Germantown also.
That'd be awesome. I'd like to see what's happening at the schools.
So Jess, is she the lady that I met over at
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that things are working out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of growth and a lot of learning taking place, but I see possibilities for great things. And I got to eat delicious biscuits. So
It's just that
Win-win.
But it does kill fish, like in living water. It kills fish.
I think exactly. I totally agree though, Odessa, with everything that you said. The role, the need to get people more into the communities, and the lack of connection for our families in Robinwood and our families at Monarch. We need to make sure, and there are families in poverty at all of our schools that are not community schools. And so,
I mean, since we have such a large population living in public housing, they call it HACA, Housing Authority, City of Annapolis, HACA. I mean, there should be a representative really coming to these meetings, because I mean, who ever heard of somebody placing a family, a mother and two children in extended stay because the kitchen ceiling caved in, and then you put them over there and make no means of transportation for them to get back and forth to school every day, plus food. I had to go out and try to find food for them to eat. So a hacker really should be part of this commission, or some kind of way we should be trying to have a representative coming from hacker.
I agree. I think the other side of that is the transportation department, right? I think that I have unfortunately heard the transportation's part of that far too many times, with families who are displaced for whatever reason, and students aren't able to get to school because the transportation department won't provide them transportation.
We have a permanent transportation, a director of that department. I mean, have they appointed someone permanent for that position yet?
I haven't heard.
Because if and when they do, that's somebody we should definitely put on the list to come and talk, because I think there are obviously, I mean, we talk and talk and talk about all the issues with transportation, and the buck stops at that desk. So
right,
that's somebody that needs to answer to all of these issues. And I think I've long believed that just the long walking radius, it moves the burden from the schools to the families. And in our suburban schools, it's sort of invisible because parents pick up the slack, and the parents, arrange carpools or buy their kids bikes or whatever they need to do to get to school. But where we see it, is here in the urban schools, where kids don't have alternative means of transportation. Their parents work or don't have a car, or, just aren't available at that time to drop them off. So I think we need to, I think that's something that needs to be revisited, probably at the whole school system level. But at the very least, they need to, here in Annapolis, they need to address the issues. And if they're comfortable with letting parents provide transportation elsewhere in the county, that's fine. But obviously, it's not working here.
Right.
So,
plus our adherence to arbitrary rules, like that Annapolis middle student who lives on the bus route, the magnet school bus route, but is not allowed to get on the magnet bus, and therefore has been Ubering to school every single day since the beginning of school.
Yeah, well, I mean, my kid as well would have to actually walk past. I mean, the bus stop for Annapolis Middle is right on our street. My daughter would actually have to walk from our house to the Eastport Library to pick up the bus that she's supposed to get on to go to Bates.
That takes her to Annapolis Middle anyway.
No,
Right?
that one actually does go directly,
Oh,
does
direct.
drop off at, well, it drops off at Bates, but like she's not even supposed to get on the bus at Annapolis Middle, even though that's the one that's in our neighborhood.
Right. But, all right. Sorry, Indy, I know you wanted to adjourn.
Don't get us started on transportation. We'll be here all night.
I second the motion to adjourn the meeting.
Nothing else. Thank
Third.
you for everyone in attendance and watching online. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, Julian.
Yes, thank you.